Well, welcome everybody to our GLREA Thursday evening Zoom. And first thing I'd like to do is I'm John Sarver, as you can see, and I'm usually on these. And I first would like to thank our sponsors, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Eagle, Homeland Solar, McNaught and McKay, Iron Ridge Racking, Harvest Solar, and Shree Energy. And tonight we're going to have a more informal show or Zoom. Usually we have a presenter who comes and does a PowerPoint and for about 20, 30 minutes, and then we have Q&A. I thought it would be fun to kind of do some sharing of EV experiences. And so that's our kind of topic for tonight. And it's I guess the first thing I'll ask is, if you have an EV, why don't you raise your virtual hand? Or, okay, okay, you gotta, okay, good. I was kind of hoping we got some real hands too. That's good. Okay, that's a finger and a thumb. That counts. Okay, good. What? Okay, we got a bunch of them. Okay, we'll probably run out of time. That's okay. I'm gonna have Roger Eberhard start us off and kind of share his experience. He's compared to some of you folks, he's fairly new. Go ahead, Roger. Kind of give us your tell us a little about your the car and your experience to date.
Yeah, thanks, John. This has been an interesting discussion so far. Gee, my goodness, a lot of long timers here. My wife and I have had a Hyundai Ioniq 5 for a little less than a year, about 9,000 miles. And we bought it after a long line of plug-in hybrids. We had a Ford and a Honda and a Audi over many years that were all plug-in hybrids that we thought very highly of and really enjoyed, served our purposes well. But last year we decided we were ready for a full EV. It's our local use car. We drive it around for all of our local errands and whatever we do locally. I think the longest trip we've taken has been about 50 miles. And we have a gas SUV that we use for towing and for trips. So it's our local vehicle. We have a off-the-grid 3,000 watt solar system in our backyard that we use to charge it. This time of year, we can charge it mostly with solar, and in the winter, mostly utility. So on an annual basis, we're running at approximately half on our solar system. And we have it set up for running 240 volt charging. For those of you that know about EV charging, that's level 2 charging. But I run the amperage way down to save our storage batteries because the car can draw a tremendous amount of electricity really fast. The Ioniq 5 has a very, very fast charging infrastructure built into it. And if we use it on trips, that would be wonderful. We could charge up really quickly at public stations, but we don't. We haven't charged at all yet at any public facilities. We like the car a lot. We think it's probably the best car we've ever owned for its purpose. It's comfortable, it's fun to drive, it's really nicely set up ergonomically, great utility. It's a hatchback, so it swallows a whole lot of stuff, and it's just a really, really nice vehicle. Hyundai did a wonderful job with that. It's not made in North America, so it doesn't qualify for the federal tax breaks or tax credits, but Hyundai does offer the equivalent of that off of the MSRP. So it's kind of a wash in terms of the finances of the credit part. Hyundai also offers a couple of years of free charging at Electrify America stations, and also a free home level 2 charging station if you don't already have one. We did, of course, because we'd been charging our plug-in hybrids for some time. So overall, it's been just a great experience. We're completely sold on EVs. We've had no problems with it in all 4 seasons. It has a good heat pump for heating and air conditioning, which is really efficient. And I'm constantly amazed at the efficiency of the vehicle. Right now, we're getting about 4.8 miles per kilowatt hour, which means we can drive all the way to Meyer and back on 2 kilowatts of power, 2 kilowatt hours of power. And that's just amazing. That's about, for us, about 30 cents worth of electricity for a Meyer trip. So it's great for that. And boy, I sure don't miss going to gas stations. We avoid driving our gas SUV whenever we possibly can. So that's our experience. I guess I pass it on to other people and we can ask questions later.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let me share a little of my experience with my Tesla Model Y, which I've had for about a year and a half. I have a juice box level 2 charger in my garage, so almost all my charging, unless I'm on a trip, is done overnight because Consumers Energy, has that night savers rate, and so I'm programmed in order to start charging at 11 p.m. and I can charge from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. at the kind of super off peak rate, and so that's all my charging is done then. I've noticed because I keep pretty good track of my electricity that my electric use has gone up about 50% because I'm pretty frugal on my electric use, but it's all off peak, and so I kind of figure that I'm saving about 50% on fuel. I mean, rough estimate is how much I'm paying for electricity is about a half what I would pay for gasoline. Of course, I don't have any oil changes and other those sorts of expenses too. But let's see. I do have a solar system, but I don't have any batteries, and so I'm not charging at all my EV with my solar system. I do take usually 3 trips to New York, New Jersey a year to visit my 2 daughters and family. And since I have a Tesla, I could take advantage of the supercharger network, and I have not had a problem at all. I've never run into a situation where there wasn't an available spot, although now that the network's going to expand to include other people, that may change. As many of you know, Tesla is network, at least some of it is going to be available to Ford and GM and other types of vehicles. But it's easy to plug in your destination. The navigation system will tell you where you should go. They're right off the interstate, easy to find. There's food and bathrooms close by. Now, I do takes about 3 stops for me to get to the East Coast. But to me, that's not a problem. I need to stop anyway and stretch my legs, have some food, take a pee. So I did talk to a neighbor though, who said, "Oh, he couldn't deal with that. If he gets in a car, he just wants to go someplace. He doesn't want to stop." But I have no problem with doing some stops. Let's see. Oh, the one problem I ran into, and I won't do this again, is I wasn't planning very well, and so in New Jersey, I pulled into a supercharger. I had about 1% left on my battery, so I try to avoid that. No operational and maintenance issues at all. I did have a flat tire, but I had purchased a tire kit which had a small compressor, so I was able to I found out I had a flat tire in Ohio, but I live in East Lansing, but I was able with the compressor to kind of periodically stop and pump up the tire and get it to back home, and then I went to Discount Tire and got a free fix. The tire kit also has that one of those you can insert the gas, the sealant, but I didn't want to use that because it's kind of expensive. And I did find that I was able to kind of, like I said, periodically stop and pump her up and then keep going. Let's see. That's about it. I mean, I'm saving some money, but Teslas are not cheap. And so it's never going to pay for itself, but cars never pay for themselves anyway, right? And so I have to say that, it's been it's been fun. It's a fun experience, which I think a lot of people have found. Now I'm going to ask Al to talk because he's also got a Tesla, but he and I chatted a little before we got started here, and he's up in the Upper Peninsula, and so far he's won the prize for having bought a EV, I guess 6 years ago. Al, kind of give us some of your background.
Okay, I bought a level 3 charger in April of 2018, and I guess
You met a
I
Model
had
3, right? You met a Tesla Model 3, right?
you're right, a Tesla Model 3,
Right.
and I guess I had invested in Tesla right from the start, right when they were available. I bought 100 shares of Tesla at $20 a share. And, and so by the time I bought my Model 3, I had, plenty of paper profit from buying the 100 shares of Tesla at $20 a share. So I think by the time Tesla reached its peak, I think I could have bought 8 or 9 Model 3s if I would have cashed it in. But so yeah, it's I have to disagree that it'll never pay for itself because in my particular situation, it certainly did better than any other car that I've bought. But and I've had some interesting experiences living in the Upper Peninsula. It's fairly remote, and both my wife and I are on second marriages, so we try to keep the finances separate. So it was not really attractive for me to charge at home because then we would both have to be paying for the electricity for my car. So there was an incentive to charge outside the home, and the town that I live in put in a free level 3 charger. They wanted to promote electric vehicles. So I probably used several $1,000s of the city's electricity over 5 years until they took out the charger because it was on a parking deck that they wanted to take down, and so that was their excuse for taking out the level 2 charger. And then they put in new level 3 chargers that you had to pay for to use, and the twin city across the lake from us also put in level 3 chargers, and it turns out that the one in Hancock, which is the city across the lake, theirs is much. It costs like 2 or 3 times as much to charge in Houghton rather than Hancock. So I always just go across to Hancock to charge. It's about 20 cents a kilowatt hour, and for the longest time, I was sort of obsessed with getting a Tesla to put in a supercharger up here. And Hancock would have been the ideal place to put it because they have it's pretty much the only 24/7 business in the area. It's a Circle K gas station so you can, if there was a supercharger near it, you could just, if you got there at 3 a.m. or something and everything else was closed, you could always walk to the gas station and use the restroom and buy something to eat or something. And, but I've sort of given up on that idea because, Tesla seems to be not interested in expanding their supercharger network anymore, or at least for a while. And then it would probably cost more for me to use the supercharger than it is to use the level 3 charger in Hancock. So there really isn't much of an incentive to get a supercharger up here anymore.
Yeah, well, the conventional wisdom is that, people, boy, you live in a, like the UP or Wyoming or whatever, it's really hard to make it work. But Al, you kind of showing that you've kind of making the charging thing work and making it work for you too. So that's, you had kind of indicated earlier too that, when you go to do a charge, you're just sitting in the car typically for an hour, a couple hours, or what's the?
Well, usually with this level 3 charger, I usually try to charge when it gets down to 20%, and I only charge up to 80%. So it takes maybe an hour to go from 20 to 80%. Of course, it would be several hours. It'd be 7 or 8 hours on the level 2 charger. So that was more of a challenge. But and I often just didn't charge more than a few hours.
No, you've had your car for 6 years. Have you had any maintenance issues?
Oh yeah, I've had some that there was on one of my road trips. I've taken it down to Tampa, Florida twice, and Tulsa, Oklahoma once. So on one of those road trips, a rock got thrown up from a truck tire or something and broke the glass roof. So that had to be replaced. I think it was. I guess the insurance paid for it. And and then I've never hit a deer with a car before, but I did hit one with a Tesla. So that took a few $1,000s to get replaced, to get fixed too. But I think it was probably a result of me driving at 3 or 4 in the morning in the middle of the Upper Peninsula, and there's so much acceleration with the Tesla that I had stopped at an intersection and I was accelerating to get up to 45 miles an hour or something, and a whole herd of deer ran across the road in front of me, and one of the younger ones didn't make it, ended up hitting that, and so it didn't really, it wasn't as bad as if I was going 65 miles an hour or something and hit a deer, but it was definitely had to be brought in and had it fixed for a few $1,000s.
Okay, yeah. Hey, thanks, Sal. David, you've got your hand up. Did you have a question, or you got an EV and like to kind of?
I just have an EV. I finally found where to put the hand up icon on.
Go ahead and tell us what kind of
Okay.
car you have, how long
Cool.
you've had it, what your experience
Back in
has been.
2013, we started down the EV road with a C-Max Energy, which is a plug-in hybrid. Precious little 5 kilowatt battery. So we only got, 12 to 18 miles of pure electric before the gas engine cut in, but it was interesting to get your foot in the water. And at that point, DTE was offering a free installation of a level 2 charger in your house. They give you $1,500. And sure enough, we had a contractor come in, and guess what? It cost $1,505. So they put in the level 2 charger at that point, a 30 amp capable. They put in, and this is when I got a time of use meter. So I kind of had the infrastructure in the garage, good for level 2 charging. When in 2021, the C-Max started throwing what my wife called the wrench of death, kind of like a check engine light, but worse. And it turns out there was a battery imbalance was the error code, and battery replacement on that would be hideous. So basically we moved quickly to unload the C-Max. We looked at Mach-E's, couldn't even test drive one. We looked at ID.4s, they weren't real well rated. We weren't in the market for a Tesla. My son had those, loved them, but that was more than we needed. Ended up finding a Kia Niro EV, which we purchased in January of 2022. So I already had the infrastructure in the garage for charging at home. That has been perfect for our usage model. By that, I mean, we are old retired people, so we don't commute to work. So if we do, for instance, 40, 50, 60 miles in a day with appointments and shopping, we live out in the country in Salem Township, so anything is 8 miles away. But my point is, we've been able to dial charging back to a minimum. I call it trickle charging. I think Roger talked about this, but we have, we don't even need to do the 1722 plug-in, because the car came with a what I call a trickle charger, made for 120 volt, plug into a standard outlet. And I looked on the forums, and the people on the forums were saying, yeah, we know it's a standard Edison plug, but if you give it 240, it'll pull 12 amps per leg, and you'll get twice the charging of the super slow 120 volt. That's turned out to be perfect for us. So I wired in another Edison outlet, carefully labeled at 240 volt, probably not code legal, but it's a big orange one, so it's marked. So we just, and it's up high. So we plug the charger that came with the Kia into that. And that just gives us nice 12 amps on both legs of 240 volt. No stress on that circuitry. We can use that meter for other loads to get the time of use rate. That charging overnight will give us another 60 to 80 miles of range, which we find generally adequate for our usage model. We have 8 kilowatts of PV solar here. That used to cover 60% of our annual usage on an annual basis. Net grid tie, period, no batteries, okay? This is an old 13, 14-year-old system now. So people ask, okay, do you charge from solar? Well, no, because most of our charging is during the day, and we charge at night on the time of use meter for that. Our percentage of solar has dropped since we've added the EV. That's of course significantly more, and with the panels getting older, it's now probably closer to 40% of our annual usage with the extra load of the EV on our grid tie system. Someone mentioned you're up at 4.8 kilowatts per hour. We're closer to 4, miles per kilowatt, my bad. About 4 miles per kilowatt on the Kia. So paying 16 cents a kilowatt hour on the time of use meter, overnight, off peak, costs us 4 cents a mile to run the car. So we find that workable. In terms of charging on occasion, out of the garage, we've had some good experience. We've had some bad experience with Electrify America, with ChargePoint. We've had a couple of concerns where you drive up and neither of the chargers are working, and you go in the 7-Eleven and they're, I don't know what you're talking about. They have no idea. what's going on behind their Quickie Mart or whatever it is. So don't plan on any help from the young workers at the window. But anyway, I have learned Electrify America charges, I believe, in my estimate, 2 to 3 times the actual energy rate. In other words, charging with a CCS DC fast charging, so-called, in the Kia, which is also possible. I think we're paying about 53 cents a kilowatt hour. So you compare that to 16 and you realize where the profit is with Electrify America. And I don't pity people, but I'm saying it just makes the point to me, it is a whole lot more cost effective to charge off peak in your garage than it is to plan on other vendors, Electrify America or whatever, outside, unless you get lucky and find a freebie or you grandfathered in with Tesla supercharging. I guess I'll leave it at that and questions when they come up.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's move on to Bob. I know, Bob, go ahead. Tell us again, kind of what you've got and your experience.
Hi, John. Yeah, I started with Chevy Volt in 2011, and I had never bought a Chevy before, but they were the first out with a reasonably priced plug-in, and that was a great car for 10 years. Started having some difficulties in the last 2 years. So then we also, when Chevy came out with the Bolt, we got that as soon as we could in 2017. So that's pure electric, and we've taken it on several trips. We've gone down to Georgia, Virginia, Florida, and we're able to go from Grand Rapids to Lansing and home on a single charge, or to Kalamazoo or up to Baldwin. So that's a great car. And then last October, we replaced the Volt with a Bolt EUV, which is almost the same as a Bolt. It's maybe an inch bigger in every direction, but it works just the same. And yeah, I would agree with David. Charge at home if you can. It's a lot cheaper. But it sure is wonderful to have fast chargers when you want to take a trip. I've never had any trouble with the fast chargers. I have had to call tech support on occasion. Most of the time it works fine without having to call. Only a couple times have all the chargers been in use and I've had to wait. But it hasn't been an issue. So driving electric for me has been really good. And I have also solar panels, so I'm driving almost pollution free, at least when I'm staying home. I don't know what kind of pollution factor Electrify America, ChargePoint, and the others have. But now I'm told General Motors has decided to stop producing the Bolt and the Bolt EUV. And I'm getting advertisements for other electric cars from General Motors. And to my eyes, they all look huge. And I've never wanted a big car. So I'm glad I got them while I could, because what they're selling now isn't really what I want to drive.
Interesting.
So I guess that's it for me.
Yeah, hey, thanks. Well, let's go to Jeff and then I'm going to go to the chat room, and it looks like we've got quite a few comments in there. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hi, everybody. I also own a Chevrolet Bolt. Like the previous speaker, I've always wanted to have small cars, and I bought the Bolt a year ago when they announced that they were going to stop making them at the end of last year or early this year. So I've only had my Bolt for about a year. Just to update what Bob said, though, I think Chevrolet has announced, or GM has announced that they are going to start building the Bolt, a new generation of the Bolt again, probably sometime in 2025. And the real interesting news there, just in the last month or so, was that it looks like it'll be assembled in Kansas City, Kansas, which was a pleasant surprise because I'd been assuming that they would probably want to build the small EVs in Mexico. So that is a piece of good news to me. So anyway, I've had my Bolt for a year. I've only put 6,000 or 7,000 miles on it. What makes me, I guess, a little unique compared to everybody else so far tonight is that I live in an apartment and I don't have any kind of home recharging. So I'm 100% dependent on the public charging infrastructure. I knew that going in, and I'm retired, and I really wanted to stop paying the oil companies and wanted to practice what I preach about climate change. So I knew I was going to be complicating my life a little bit, but I went into it wanting to take that challenge on. Where I've gotten very lucky, and I didn't even know this when I bought the car, was a small business here in Ann Arbor, just a 12-minute walk away, that has a large number of solar panels on all their office buildings, and they put in 2 ChargePoint level 2 charging ports, and they're open to the public. And because when they sell their electricity to the grid, you guys probably know more about this than I do, but I believe they only get paid 7 or 8 cents a kilowatt hour when they sell their excess solar electricity to DTE. So they're willing to sell that to me for 7 cents a kilowatt hour. So my line is that I kind of have home charging. I have a 12-minute walk to my garage, but I actually get my electricity for half price once I get there. So I find that interesting. So I've been doing all the numbers, and the numbers for me are pretty simple. When I'm driving around town where the Bolt is particularly efficient, like I think all EVs are at lower speeds, I'm only paying about 1.5 cents per mile for my fuel. It really should be 3 cents if I wasn't getting that 50% discount by the small business that's selling me electricity for 7 cents a kilowatt hour. So maybe I'd be paying 3 cents if I was in my own garage. But when I'm on the highway, like a previous speaker said, Electrify America, all the level 3 chargers, they'll charge 40 or 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So there on the highway where the EV is a little less efficient and I'm paying the much higher fuel price, I'm paying about 10 cents per mile. And it turned out when I had my 35 mile per gallon gasoline car before my Bolt, I was paying about 10 cents a mile. So the easy math is when I'm on a highway trip, I'm basically breaking even compared to the gasoline car I used to have. But when I'm when I'm around town and able to charge at the level 2 spot down the street, I'm saving a lot. I'm saving like 70. I'm saving either down to 3 cents or down to 1.5, depending on how you want to look at it, compared to the 10 cents that I used to pay for gasoline.
Have you had any maintenance issues?
In the first year, no. I am an engineer. I know quite a bit about the technologies. Obviously, no oil changes, no coolant. The brake wear, a lot of people don't realize that brake wear will be a lot less with an EV because of the regenerative braking. So you don't actually have to use the friction brakes near as often. That'll be one of the big maintenance changes, maintenance benefits. I expect to save a couple $100 a year over the long run with an EV and due to maintenance. Tacked on to the probably $500 or so a year I'll save based on fuel. I think another factor that people don't think about is it's obviously not so much an individual consumer thing as a societal, but when we pay for gasoline, we're mostly sending those dollars outside of our regional economy. I like to say that when you're buying gasoline, you're supporting autocratic regimes in Saudi Arabia and Texas. When we buy electricity, we're generally buying that from local sources. And so you're keeping the money you're spending on the fuel in the local and regional economy. And I think that's a big picture advantage of EVs that a lot of people don't think much about. And I guess my bottom line is for folks that haven't seriously considered EVs yet, especially if you live in a multi-vehicle household, if you've got 2 or more vehicles, and you can charge at home like most people can, I think we're at the point now where it's pretty much a no-brainer to buy an EV for one of your family vehicles. It's certainly different if you only have one family vehicle, like I only have one, so I'm dependent on the EV and making this happen. But if you've got multiple vehicles, and now with the tax credit, you know, from the federal government and the discounts that the companies that aren't getting the credit are oftentimes putting on, they're getting cheaper all the time now. I was out the door with my Bolt for $22,000, and there's very few gasoline cars, even at that size, that you can buy now for $22,000. So I think my bottom line is if you're a multi-vehicle household and you have home recharging, you're going to save money on fuel, you're going to save money on maintenance, and you're going to put less pollution into the atmosphere. So it just feels like almost a no-brainer if you have more than one vehicle and you can charge at home.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And yeah, thanks for sharing. I'm going to answer just a little in the meeting chat and then go to Dale. Let's see, I'm asked how long are my charging stops on my trip to the East Coast? Usually it's 20 to 40 minutes. Yeah, but I'm not charging to 100%. I'm charging to 80% because it kind of slows down when you're going from 80 to 100%. The heavy batteries in EV, John mentions the heavy batteries in EVs supposedly wear out tires fast. Can anyone confirm this? And it's a couple comments there, I think, is due more to the higher torque. Yeah, and let's see, torque spinning the tires wears them and generally heavier weight. Okay, let me move down the list here a little. Okay, Marcia says she's had an EV for 12 years. Her first EV was a Leaf, and for the last 5 years, she's had a Tesla Model 3. She charges at home. But when she lives part of the year in a condo, so then she has to kind of use public charging, and that is obviously presents some issues. Let me go ahead, Dale.
So we have a 2014 Nissan Leaf, and originally that had a smaller battery. I inherited it from my dad when he wasn't able to drive anymore. He bought it in 2014 new, and then we took it over in the end of second half of 2019, I think. So we've had it for about 5 years, and for a little while it had the original battery, and that's sort of, I wouldn't really recommend, unless you're going to use it solely for a local car, an EV that had a range of 80 miles or so. And until until the Tesla Model 3 came out and the Chevy Bolt, and they put a bigger battery in Nissan Leafs, there's plenty of cars now that have like 200, 300 maybe miles of range. And those are really, really useful. And even on trips, they're a little more maybe hassle. You can't just drive 500 miles without stopping. But it's not a problem for us that way. So initially, the car had a relatively low range, like 80 miles or 100 miles. There's not too many EVs anymore that have that low a range, that small a battery. In 2019, the end of 2019, I was able to upgrade the car to a 62 kilowatt hour battery, which is, so the car is equivalent to a Nissan Leaf Plus, and generally in capability equivalent to a Chevy Bolt, and a little bit less capability, I would say, than a Tesla Model 3 in terms of how far you can go. And we take that on trips from here, from Detroit area to Western New York, often, several times a year, every couple months. We drive through either Canada or through Ohio, and those trips are longer. You know, if you were just driving a gas car, it might take you 6 or 7 hours. But with charging stops, it takes another, I don't know, it makes it a longer, almost an ordeal kind of drive to go that far. But the trips that you're taking are not that often, And it's still, even on trips, the cost for fuel, if you're paying for some fast charging, it's still less than what you'd be paying for gas on a good fuel efficiency car. At home, around here, we don't pay for any charging. We have enough solar that generally we're always charging it at home from the sun. And I try to charge it on weekends because in the week during the day, we can get a little bit extra credit for the on-peak electricity that we can send out. And if I charge up the car during the week when it's home on whatever sunny days, then it's full on the weekend. On the weekend, the extra power that I have is worthless if I send it out to the grid. I mean, not worthless, but worth very little. So I try to use that off-peak electricity that I'm generating on weekends, put it in the car. And then during the week, generally charge it. If the car is low, we charge it during the day. And then otherwise we charge it off peak from the grid. Like in the wintertime, you're going to need to charge it some. Solar is not going to do it. So anyway, yeah, we like it. And that's our only car that we have on the road. I have a pickup truck that I put back on the road sometimes if I need to haul something, but usually I don't. And then one of our kids has our old previous car at college. So she still drives that. She's a little bit leery of having a car, an EV, because of where is she, like, is she going to be able to charge somewhere if she's traveling and stuff? So I'm working on maybe sometime get her one, but it needs to be something with longer range. So that's about it.
Okay, thanks, Dale. Yeah, Harvey had a question in the chat room about the impact of weight on range, and I don't know about that. So one of the rest of you might. I think most of us have experienced the fact that during the winter, because of the cold, the range is significantly affected, and the speed you drive, of course, has an impact. Because I was thinking, boy, I don't seem to be getting the range from that the Tesla folks thought I would get. But then I slowed down and I got much closer. But does anybody have any experience with weight being a significant factor with range? Does that come into play with anybody? No, I don't see anybody raising their hand. Okay. Okay, well, if go ahead, Janet. Oh, you're muted.
I don't have an answer to that question. I was just going to talk about the car experience with the car.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we've had a Tesla, the Y, since we got it last July, and I'd say it's great. We haven't even put in a special charger in the garage yet because we just plug it into the regular wall and it, charges overnight. For trips, I'd say there was no difference at all in a trip compared to a gas car because, it's not really healthy to drive for 500 miles without stopping. And so the Tesla, as somebody else mentioned, just, plans your route and tells you exactly where to charge. It takes you right to it. And we never waited for a second, and it only spent about 15 minutes charging. By the time someone had run to the restroom, it was charged because they tell you to charge when you're not completely empty, and it charges really fast up to like way beyond 50 or 60%, and then it says to go ahead. And so then a couple hours later, when it was trying to stretch your legs again, we charged again. Like we went down to West Virginia to a town called Beckley. It's south of Charleston. And I think we just charged, we charged in Charleston just an hour before we got to our friend's house, and we charged in Columbus, and it was like nothing. And the charging places are usually somewhere where you could get something to eat if you wanted to. But I'd say that there wasn't any hindrance at all. And we actually didn't pay for the charging because when you have a friend recommend you to get a Tesla, and then you get, so many miles of free charging. So I'd say it's been great so far and no problems.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at the chat room, and Harvey also asked about the longevity, about the batteries. When would the batteries need to be replaced? And I don't know if I've read that batteries typically are lasting longer than people think. Uh, and I also know that, batteries from EVs are being repurposed to be used on the grid. At some point, the battery may not be suitable for an electric vehicle, but they can continue their life, kind of helping as storage for the grid. Okay, now Jeff says that regarding battery life, we're going to learn a lot more in the next few years, but a company called Recurrent is collecting data on battery life. And so far, the data is very encouraging, with battery capacity only declining at a very low rate over time. He mentions EV batteries being warranted for 8 years. Does anybody else have some experience they'd like to share? If you want to raise your hand, I think we have some other. Go ahead, Mike.
So my first electric vehicle was a Ford C-Max 12 years ago, had it for 3 years lease. And at the end of that time, I wrote a letter to Ford and I said, if you can't develop a reasonable, low priced, fully electric vehicle, I'm going to switch. And they didn't. So at the end of my second C-Max, I switched to a Chevrolet Bolt. And I love it. I had no problems with it. The only thing is that after my lease was up, they had this battery recall because of some fires. And so my lease was up and I said, oh, I want to buy my car. They said, I can't because they got a hold on it. And so I asked GM if I can go month to month until the battery came in. It took about 6 months for the battery to come in, but then they replaced the battery and then they give me a brand new warranty, 10 years warranty. So it's like getting a new car. I was fortunate. I was able to charge at work, so I didn't have to worry about it. I do have solar on my house. I have a 9 kilowatt system, and I have charged, but I do it like the other guy said, on the weekends during the sunny day. I have taken a trip to North Carolina. I've gone to Traverse City a couple of times, but I went to North Carolina and went to the Smoky Mountains. And I'm driving in the Smoky Mountains. I started with like a 50% charge on the battery. And so my remaining distance was like 150 miles. And then I drove for 4 hours. And at the end of the 4 hours, my distance to empty was 300 miles. I ended up with more miles than when I started because of the regeneration and going through the mountains of the Smoky Mountains. It was charging, and it was wonderful.
Well,
that's my story.
Yeah, that's interesting. Ben Brown, you have a Fiat, so why don't you unmute and tell us a little about your experience?
Okay. Actually, I was surprised by getting a Fiat in the last week. I had my main driver had been a Mitsubishi i-MiEV for 13 years. And there's a component on the gear shift that had failed, and it was looking like maybe it might be possibly 2 months before they could get that. And our local EV person said there was a Fiat 500e. So it's brand new to me, but it's been, I'm not used to having a EV sports type of feel. The Fiat i-MiEV is kind of more of a like 0 to 60 in maybe 11 seconds. But And it did have DC quick charging, which was a real big plus. I'd taken that from Kalamazoo, from South Haven to Ann Arbor to Mount Pleasant and things like that. I think it's really important. So often I have family that work like for BP Oil, and their standard is if you don't have luxury to start with, you don't need the vehicle. But when I purchased my car, I was and it allowed me to save money because I stopped having repairs on gasoline vehicles, save enough money actually to the down payment on my home. And so I live in a zero energy tiny home, but that the city and Habitat helped put together. But it has been expectations based on budget. And this has been absolutely liberating for me. I actually saved enough money over the 13 years I've owned the IMEA to buy my solar panels and work toward getting the installation. And the estimates with the house having such a low consumption rate is that the panels, it's actually 4 bifacial solar panels. The estimates are based on what my normal electric bill is through consumers, that it will cover all my electric needs for at least 3/4 of the year, including the car. So that's what I can say.
Yeah, well, thanks, Ben. I noticed in the chat room, Marcia raises a concern about maintenance for us Tesla owners, which is actually a concern of mine too, because she talked about having to go from Frankfurt or Traverse City to Grand Rapids for service. Yeah, I'm in East Lansing, so I'd have to go to Ann Arbor or Grand Rapids or Clarkston. So I haven't had to do that yet, but sometimes I kind of think, because I'm a one car single person. So, if I have to take my Tesla in for maintenance, and I'm in Ann Arbor, I'll have to go visit some friends. Let's see. Now we're getting, it's 7:52. So, is there anybody who really is eager to kind of share their story? If you are, kind of raise your hand, because we've got about 8 minutes left. Or if you got a question that you really, go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to offer a little footnote on cold weather usage. It does appear there are some differences in battery chemistry and how they react with this. You were quoting, I don't know if it was 15-20% drops, or maybe nobody quoted it, in the wintertime. Yes, there is certainly a drop, but I kept noticing with the Kia that ours was more like 8 or 10%. And I'm going, gee, I wonder if this is justified. Well, there was a guy who's the writer for the Free Press. I forget who that is, and he mentioned something about cold weather range, and anyway, I wrote to him and said, mine seems to be less than yours. He says, aha, you must have a Kia or a Hyundai. And I said, yeah. He said he also had one of those and also noticed less drop in the wintertime. So I don't know what the chemistry is on the battery or how they do it, or if they use, I don't know. But there do seem to be differences in the cold weather loss. Ours wasn't outrageous.
It looks like Jeff may have a comment on that. Did you want to?
I'm pretty sure, David, that's because I think Hyundai and Kia are using heat pumps instead of resistive heaters, and they're a lot more efficient. My Bolt
That's true. That's true for the usage. You're right about the heating and cooling. In other words, yeah, the heat pumps, I'm told, take about 1/3 of the energy of resistance heating to heat the car. Well, what we were talking about is battery life, range in the wintertime, not usage. But good point.
Well,
Yeah,
but the usage will lower your range. If you've got the heater on, it will definitely lower the range of your vehicle in the winter.
Yeah. It is related, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Rob, go ahead.
Well, we started out in 2006 with, Prius hybrid or whatever. And then in 2019, we got a Prius Prime. And it was perfect for our use because I drove it back and forth to work. That was like 11-mile round trip every day. And so we were using purely electric on that Prius Prime, but we could use it for long trips, because it would kick into the gas when we went to go across the state or whatever. I retired last year, and a year ago we bought a Chevy Bolt, and we just sold our Prius Prime because we decided we only need one vehicle, and we'd been using the Bolt for a year and had gotten comfortable with how we figure out how to take longer trips. Now, in a lot of places, like was mentioned, fast DC charging is available along the major highways, but like we went down to the Eclipse in Indiana and took a pit path down into the middle of Indiana. And I can say there were very few fast DC chargers down in the middle of Indiana. There's plenty around the northern towns in Indianapolis and other big cities, but down through the middle of the state, no. The only time I've had to sit and wait for a charger was when I went to visit my brother in Illinois, and there was a fast charging station with about 4 or 5 chargers, and I put it. You have apps for all these chargers, so you just on your smartphone you just put in, it'll tell you what's available and what's not available. And it said it was available, but by the time I got there, somebody else had snuck in and was charging. So the Bolt definitely had lower range this winter for us, particularly in the really cold snap. So typically it's rated at 259 miles, and I think we were closer to 200 miles in the coldest snap time. But now as it's gotten warmer, it's way back up. And the other thing that's been going on in the chat is people have been talking about road taxes and registration charges, and that's a really tough topic to address. Our Prius Prime.
They ask about insurance too. Have you had any experience with higher insurance rates?
No, it's about the same because insurance rates have been going up every year anyway. So how can I attribute it to having an EV? I don't think so. It's just been going up. So registration fees are definitely, they're already more for hybrids and plug-in hybrids, and then even more for EVs. And for our Prius Prime that we drove very little, we ended up paying more in registration fees than we ever would have paid if we'd just driven it using gas. So it's the current methods are problematic of how you're going to pay for road repairs and road taxes. So that's an ongoing issue everybody's going to have to talk about.
Yeah, that's with them. Yeah, that's a like you say, an ongoing issue with the how are we going to pay for roads? There's talking like saying about
efficient cars are all already being penalized because hybrids and plug-in hybrids are all charged a surcharge because they don't buy enough gas. And if we're in a world where we're trying to discourage the purchase of gas, there's got to be another mechanism for maintaining the roads, not gas taxes.
Yeah, and the Lansing folks, the legislators are looking at some sort of per mile tax, which gets tricky for a whole bunch of reasons. But that's one thing that's being discussed is can they somehow get a handle on how many miles you drive and actually just charge you as a registration fee how many miles you drive a year. But lots of privacy issues, and it gets a little tricky. Greg, go ahead.
I worked in the insurance industry for like 10 years, property casualty. So the big things that you got to think about is not so much that it's an EV, it's repair costs and accidents. Some cars get known for being accident prone, even though they're not much. Pontiac Grand Ams, they were horribly rated because teenage drivers liked them. They were small, quick, and cheap. But then inexperienced drivers gave them a bad rep. So what you'll find is if a car is very popular, but gets in a lot of accidents, that can artificially raise the rate on that model. Or like with some of the Ocean models, if you've caught the article recently, $1,000 estimate, and they totaled the car for 55 grand because Fisker is basically going out of business at this point and they can't get parts to repair it. And so now what that'll do is raise those rates through the roof. They won't want to insure them, so they'll discourage it through high rates. So that's something to consider. Just call ahead. But for the most part, a $50,000 car is a $50,000 car. You're going to pay the same rate if it's gas, hybrid, EV. It's more about the replacement cost and then the cost to repair. And if they have a known structural issue, that'll also feed into it. But all those details are getting into nickels and dimes, like $1,000 versus $1,100 a year or something like that. You're not paying a whole lot of difference on a lot of it. It's more or less if a model is hard to service. So a big 3 model, Mach-E's, the Bolts, even the Teslas, they're a known commodity at this point. They pretty much are stable. They're going to go and kind of stay where they are. It's like Rivian, Fisker. If any of the Chinese models start getting imported, you'll see those have some fluctuation for a while just because they're new and unknown. And whatever that insurance company's experience is, and then they all share data across the board. They have clearinghouses that collect the claims data nationwide so that they can do their own rating and find out what's going on, not just from us, but also all the carriers in the state of Michigan. That's just clearinghouse data, and they want to know, fatalities, safety ratings, all that stuff. So the data's out there, but
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Greg. That's very helpful to have that context. And it sounds like from what you said too, that a number of the EVs, Tesla and others, have been around long enough that there's enough history that the insurance industry knows what to charge.
and they're stable, and you can get parts for them for the most part. It's just like even like the brand new car. It's a 2025 model. If you wreck it, it's going to take 6 months to get parts because they're just not readily available. But yeah, it's going to be like the brand new models from startup engineering companies. That could be an issue. But for the most part, 90% of what you're going to find at this point, you're not going to pay much of a difference. It's just going to be, more about your driving habits and your own past history, tickets and things of that nature. That'll feed into it more than anything.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's after 8 o'clock. I'm conscious of people's time. So thanks to everybody for coming. And next week on Thursday, we're going to have a member meeting, and you've got notice for this meeting, so you'll be getting a notice for next week's Thursday meeting too. Hey, thank you everybody for coming. I know we didn't get to all the questions. I don't even think we got to everybody sharing their experiences. I really do appreciate those of you who kind of shared your experiences, and I've recorded this, so this will be on YouTube channel, and I'm hoping that our experiences will be helpful to people. They'll watch the video and learn some things from actual owners who aren't, who have some experience and aren't trying to sell anything. So yeah, again, thanks everybody for coming, and hope to see you next Thursday. Take care.
Thank you guys. Fun.